Close your eyes and picture America in 1955. Eisenhower is running the show, suburbs are popping up like mushrooms after rain, and rock and roll is rattling jukeboxes across every diner from New Jersey to California. Teenagers are slicking back their hair with brow cream, soda jerks are pouring cherry cokes, and gas is just 20 cents a gallon. It's a time when owning a shiny new car wasn't just transportation, it was a full-blown declaration of success. And right at the heart of this chrome-covered dream rolled a car that would sweep the country off its feet, the 1955 Ford Fairlane. This wasn't just another Detroit product rolling off the assembly line. This was Ford's knockout punch. In just 1 year, it sold over 600,000 units. 600,000. Think about that. While Elvis was still learning how to swivel his hips, Ford was selling the Fairlane faster than dealers could polish the chrome. But the question is, why? Why did America lose its mind over this car? Let's dig in. To understand the Fairlane's success, you've got to understand the battlefield of the mid-50s. Chevrolet had been running hot with the Bel Air, practically owning the driveways of middle-class America. Ford knew they couldn't keep playing it safe. They needed a star, something bold enough to stop folks in their tracks. So, when 1955 arrived, Ford unleashed the Fairlane like Sinatra walking on stage at the stands. It wasn't shy, it wasn't subtle, it was chrome, curves, and confidence, all rolled into one. If Chevy's Bel Air was the prom king, the Fairlane was the new kid who just walked in, stole your girl, and then drove her home in style. The Fairlane had a look that stopped traffic, even when it was parked. Long, low, and wide, it seemed to glide, just sitting still. And then there was the famous Fairlane side trim, the sweeping line of stainless steel that sliced through the body like a racing stripe in a tuxedo. It gave the car motion, elegance, and just the right amount of swagger. And don't even get me started on the chrome. Ford wasn't stingy with the shiny stuff. The grille looked hungry enough to eat smaller cars alive. The bumpers gleamed like silver dollar smiles, and when the sun hit it on a Sunday drive, you could practically blind the neighbors. This wasn't just style, it was theater. Owning a Fairlane was like having a Hollywood spotlight follow you everywhere you went. Part of the secret to the Fairlane's success was how many ways Ford served it up. This wasn't one model, it was practically a buffet line of options. You could pick a two-door sedan if you wanted something sporty, a four-door if you had a growing family, a convertible for summer nights, or even a Skyliner hardtop that made you the king of the car show. And if you needed something practical, Ford even gave you a station wagon, so you could haul kids, groceries, and maybe even your fishing boat down to the lake. Ford understood something simple. America wasn't one size fits all. The Fairlane was flexible. No matter your lifestyle or your paycheck, there was a Fairlane that felt like it was built just for you. Now, style will get you noticed, but in the mid-50s, power was bragging rights, and the Fairlane delivered. Under the hood, Ford introduced the brand new Y-Block V8. Buyers could choose between different versions, from a 272 cubic inch to a 292, pushing out as much as 182 horsepower. Remember, this was 1955, a time when horsepower was something you bragged about at backyard barbecues, something teenagers whispered about while leaning on the hood at the drive-in. A V8 wasn't just an engine, it was a badge of honor. Sure, Ford still offered a six-cylinder, but let's be honest, most buyers wanted that sweet V8 rumble. It meant you weren't just going places, you were going places fast. But the Fairlane wasn't all muscle. It also came with touches that made the average American feel like they were driving into the future. Ford rolled out a ball-joint front suspension that gave it a smoother ride than the clunky setups of the past. You could order power steering and power brakes, luxuries that suddenly made driving less of a workout and more of a glide. And then, of course, the automatic transmission. For drivers who didn't want to row through gears, Ford's Fordomatic made the Fairlane feel like it was floating down the road. Add in little comforts and options like radios that pulled in the latest rock and roll stations, and suddenly, your commute felt like an adventure instead of a chore. Here's the real magic of the 1955 Fairlane. It wasn't just a car that looked good or drove well, it was a car that showed up at exactly the right cultural moment. Like Elvis, stepping on stage right when teenagers were ready to rebel. America in 55 was buzzing. Suburbs were spreading faster than dandelions. White picket fences lined the streets. And Dad finally had a job that didn't require him to break his back in the factory. Highways were opening up, connecting towns like never before. Teenagers, for the first time in history, had disposable income and the freedom that came with it. And everyone, everywhere, wanted a shiny piece of the American dream sitting in their driveway. The Fairlane was the perfect fit. It was bold, it was modern, and it had that confident, I've made it stance that mirrored the country itself. Ford even gave it a name with a pedigree, Fairlane, the name of Henry Ford's own estate. That little detail gave buyers the feeling they weren't just purchasing a car, they were buying into Ford family heritage, like getting a piece of the dynasty. But none of this happened by accident. Behind the scenes, Ford had people like George Walker, their design chief, who believed cars should make people feel like stars. He pushed for long, low lines, heavy chrome, and details that shouted success. Meanwhile, Ernest Breech, one of Ford's top executives, had hammered home the message that Ford needed to catch up with Chevy or get buried. Together, this mix of vision and pressure created the Fairlane, a car that was both stylish and attainable. It was as if Ford had read America's mood like a love letter and answered with steel, chrome, and horsepower. And let's be real, cars in the 1950s weren't just transportation, they were props in the theater of life. The Fairlane quickly found itself in the spotlight, showed up in Hollywood films, rolled down Sunset Boulevard, and became the ride of choice for the kind of guy who always got the girl. A Fairlane Sunliner convertible, top down, radio blaring some doo-wop tune. It was a ticket to stardom even if you were just a kid from Kansas. This was the car you rolled into the drive-in with, hoping the back seat got more action than the movie screen. This was the car you parked at the diner, chrome gleaming under the neon, with your buddies leaning against the fenders while you tried to look cooler than James Dean. The Fairlane wasn't just a car, it was part of the set dressing for the 1950s lifestyle. Everyone remembers it because it blended so seamlessly into American pop culture. It was in the movies, in the magazines, and in the memories of a whole generation. But here's the clincher. The real reason Ford sold over 600,000 of these beauties? For all the style, the power, the Hollywood cool, the Fairlane didn't cost like a Cadillac. It wasn't some unreachable dream car. It started at about $1,900 brand new. That's around $22,000 in today's money. For perspective, that was cheaper than some fully loaded Chevys, but it looked just as good, or better. Ford nailed the sweet spot. The Fairlane was affordable enough for the average working family, but it looked like $1,000,000. You could pull it into your driveway and suddenly feel like you'd arrived, that you were part of the booming, optimistic America everyone talked about. That balance of price and presence was rocket fuel for sales. Think of it this way. Chevy might have had the prom king, but Ford showed up with a tuxedo, the prettiest date, and a flask hidden in the glove box. That's why people lined up at the dealerships in 1955. They weren't just buying a car. They were buying status, freedom, and a little slice of the American dream. And Ford delivered it without emptying their wallets. Once people slid into a Fairlane, they didn't just buy a car, they practically signed up for a long-term relationship. You know the kind. The one that starts with fireworks, then gets comfortable, and before you know it, you're buying matching recliners and arguing over which channel to watch. Ford had cracked the code. The Fairlane balanced flash with function, price with performance, and comfort with a little bit of danger. It was like marrying the hot girl who also cooks a mean meatloaf. Rare, reliable, and guaranteed to make the neighbors jealous. Families who bought a Fairlane in 55 often stuck with Ford for decades. Dad would swear by it. Mom would defend it like her Tupperware collection. And the kids? They grew up in the back seat. Sometimes literally conceived back there after a drive-in movie and a six-pack. If that back seat could talk, it'd need a priest, a lawyer, and a shot of penicillin. The Fairlane wasn't just transportation, it was a family member, the kind that took you to school, to church, to prom, and maybe helped you lose your virginity. If you were lucky and fast enough to fold the bench seat back, that's why loyalty lasted. The Fairlane wasn't just a car, It was a rite of passage. The Fairlane name didn't just fade away after 1955. It stuck around, morphing into all kinds of shapes and sizes. By the 60s, the Fairlane was flexing muscles of its own, rolling into drag strips and turning heads at stoplights. It was like watching your high school sweetheart go from prom queen to the cougar that still turns heads at the reunion. Different look, same attitude. But let's be honest, the 1955 model is still the crown jewel. That's the one everyone remembers. It was the car that said, "America's booming. Life is good, and damn it, look at all this chrome." Today, when a pristine 55 Fairlane rolls across an auction block, the crowd doesn't just see a car, they see a time machine. It's a piece of living history, dripping with nostalgia and polished hard enough to see your bald spot in it. Guys in the audience tug at their belts, women whisper about their first boyfriend's Fairlane, and somewhere in the back, a man is seriously debating mortgaging his home just to park one in his garage. Because that's the legacy of the Fairlane. It wasn't just steel, paint, and rubber. It was confidence, youth, sex appeal, and Sunday afternoon road trips all welded together. The kind of car that made you fall in love with driving, and maybe also fall in lust with whoever was sitting in the passenger seat. The Fairlane didn't just capture America's imagination, it captured its hormones, its paycheck, and half its high school memories. And that's why, even decades later, one glimpse of that chrome smile still makes people weak in the knees, kind of like your first crush walking back into the bar after 40 years, still wearing that same perfume. So, why did America go crazy for the 1955 Ford Fairlane? Because it was more than a car. It was timing, style, power, and price all hitting the jackpot at once. It made families feel successful, made teenagers feel cool, and made Chevy sweat bullets. 600,000 buyers couldn't resist. The Fairlane was America on wheels. Bold, confident, affordable, and unforgettable. Now, here's the big question for you. If you had the chance to cruise down Main Street in a 55 Fairlane, chrome sparkling, radio cranked, maybe a milkshake in the cup holder, would you take it? Or do you still think Chevy's Bel Air was the real king of 55? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if you'd love a ride in one, and subscribe for more stories from the golden age of Detroit steel. Because cars like the Fairlane weren't just built to drive, they were built to dream.